For 34 years, I was the daughter my family forgot until a payment was due. Not a birthday, not a promotion, not the night I signed the lease on my first real office in Manhattan with hands that would not stop shaking. Not the morning my name appeared in a business journal beside the words Chief Executive Officer, as if the title belonged to someone steadier, cleaner, more loved. They remembered me when a tuition bill needed restructuring, when a vendor threatened to sue, when my father's company needed quiet accounting help that no one wanted to admit came from the daughter they called dramatic, when my mother needed someone to absorb humiliation so my brother could keep shining. And 48 hours before Preston Hale's wedding, they remembered me again. My mother, Marjorie, did not hug me when I arrived in Newport. She did not ask about my flight. She did not ask whether I was tired after 3 straight weeks of acquisition meetings, court filings, and creditor negotiations. She walked across a room full of white roses and wealthy strangers, placed a leather folder in my lap, and told me there was an $80,000 catering balance that needed to be handled before the rehearsal dinner could continue smoothly. Then she smiled. That was always the dangerous part with Marjorie Hale. The smile, the perfect lipstick, the pearl earrings, the voice soft enough to make cruelty sound like etiquette. "Don't make this uncomfortable, Vivian," she said, as if I were the one embarrassing the family by noticing the knife. At the time, I thought the invoice was the insult. I was wrong. The invoice was only the warning shot. My name is Vivian Hale. I was 34 when this happened. I ran a distressed debt acquisition firm out of Manhattan, which is a polished way of saying I made my living buying broken promises from institutions that no longer wanted to hold them, defaulted commercial loans, collapsing real estate portfolios, corporate debt wrapped in lies, desperation, and signatures people later pretended not to recognize. I knew exactly what panic looked like when it dressed itself in expensive fabric. That weekend, panic wore my brother's custom tuxedo. Preston had always been the golden son. Handsome, charming, photographed from the right angles and forgiven from every angle. My parents spoke his name like a brand they had invested in early. Preston, the visionary. Preston, the closer. Preston, the future of Hale Properties. Preston, who could crash a car, empty an account, miss a deadline, lie about a number, and still somehow become the victim of everyone else's lack of faith. I was the opposite investment. Too serious, too difficult, too sharp, too ambitious, unless my ambition could be used to repair something Preston had broken. My parents called me cold because I learned not to cry in rooms where tears became evidence against me. They called me selfish because I eventually stopped confusing sacrifice with love. By the time Preston announced his engagement to Amara Whitcomb, I had already spent years keeping a careful distance from my family. Amara came from old Atlanta money, the kind that moved quietly through courtrooms, foundations, universities, and private banks. Her father, Judge Elias Whitcomb, was a retired federal judge with a reputation for patience that should never be mistaken for weakness. Preston did what he always did. He performed. He performed wealth. He performed humility. He performed devotion. He performed success with such elegant confidence that even intelligent people leaned closer to listen. He spoke about Manhattan acquisitions, strategic expansion, capital movement, and legacy assets. He wore watches worth more than some apartments and called them sentimental gifts. He used borrowed money to make donations, then used the donations to prove he was generous. By the wedding weekend, 500 people believed they were about to watch a prince marry a princess. By the end of that same weekend, My brother would be handcuffed in front of the ice sculpture he had insisted be carved in the shape of the Hale family crest. My parents would lose the Newport mansion they used as proof that God favored them. Amara would remove her ring with hands that shook only once. Judge Whitcomb would look at me across a ballroom full of broken champagne glasses and understand that I had not come there to ruin a wedding. I had come there to stop a crime from using me as collateral. And I would walk away holding the debt my family had spent years pretending did not exist. People like to imagine revenge as something loud. A slap, a scream, a glass thrown against a wall, a speech delivered while everyone gasps and music cuts off at the perfect moment. That is not how real revenge works. Real revenge is quiet. It is stamped, notarized, time-stamped, filed, copied, and sent to the right compliance department before anyone realizes the room has shifted. Real revenge is learning the rules so well that when the people who trained you to feel powerless try to trap you again, they end up signing their own confession. I did not go to Newport planning to destroy my family. I went because my assistant had already declined 3 calls from my mother. My father had left 1 voicemail using the word duty, and Preston had sent a text saying, "Try not to make this weekend about you." I went because a part of me, smaller than I like to admit, still wanted to see whether they could stand in a beautiful room and treat me like a person for one evening. They could not. If you have ever been the one your family only remembered when money was needed, you will understand what I did next. If you have ever been blamed for the wound because you finally stopped covering it, you will understand why I did not scream when my mother handed me that bill. I did not embarrass her. I did not throw the folder back. I did not tell the room what I already suspected about Preston's empire. I paid attention, because 2 things were true before the first champagne toast was even poured. My family was drowning, and I had already bought the water. By the time I reached the Newport estate, the sun was sinking into the Atlantic like it wanted to avoid my family. The house sat on a cliff above the water, all pale stone, tall windows, and inherited arrogance. Valets moved under the porte cochere. Champagne caught the evening light in crystal flutes. Inside, a jazz trio played softly enough to make wealth sound tasteful. A young woman with a headset checked my name against a tablet. "Vivian Hale," I said. Her expression shifted for half a second. Not enough for anyone else to notice. Enough for me. "Oh," she said. "Yes, your table is through the conservatory near the East Service Corridor." Not the family table, the East Service Corridor, near the doors where waiters disappeared with empty plates. There are insults that hurt because they surprise you. Then there are insults so familiar they become architecture. White roses everywhere, crystal chandeliers, ocean views, a champagne tower in the middle of the room, delicate enough to collapse with one wrong touch. Guests pretended not to notice that I had been seated like an afterthought. And there was Preston. My brother stood near the fireplace in a midnight blue tuxedo, laughing like a man who had never paid for a mistake. Men leaned toward him. Women smiled. Across the room, my mother floated between guests in a champagne silk dress, accepting compliments as if she had personally arranged the sunset. Marjorie Hale's gift was presentation. She could stand in front of a burning building and convince people the smoke was part of the atmosphere. My father, Conrad, stood by the bar with a glass of scotch, watching everyone the way he watched balance sheets. Value, risk, leverage. I sat near the service corridor and asked the waiter for water. For 15 minutes, no one from my family approached me. So I observed. Preston checked his phone 6 times in 10 minutes, not casually. He angled the screen away from the room, read too quickly, locked it, smiled too brightly, then checked again. His left thumb tapped the side of the phone in a rhythm I remembered from childhood. Preston only did that when he was waiting to see whether a lie had held. My mother watched him watching his phone. My father watched my mother. And I watched all three of them. That was when Marjorie finally came to my table. She did not ask about my flight. She simply lowered herself into the chair beside me and placed a leather folder on my lap. "Handle this quietly," she said. I opened it. Inside was a catering invoice for $80,000. Balance due immediately. Final payment required before full service completion. The words urgent settlement had been highlighted in yellow. For a moment, the jazz music seemed to thin. I looked up at my mother. No. Her smile remained. Her eyes did not. "This is not the time for dramatics." "I agree," I said. "So ask Preston to pay for Preston's dinner." A tiny muscle moved in her cheek. To everyone else, she still looked serene. "Your brother's accounts are temporarily restricted," she said. "A portfolio transfer is taking longer than expected. It is a cash flow timing issue." "Then the caterer can wait for the portfolio?" "Do not be vulgar. Vulgar is handing your daughter an $80,000 bill before asking how she is." Her hand tightened around her clutch. "You always do this." "No," I said. "I usually pay first and hate myself later. I'm trying something new." Her face changed then, but only for me. I saw the woman who had once told me family did not keep score after pressuring me to take out loans she later redirected toward Preston's first sports car. I saw the woman who called it helping my brother establish himself while I worked 3 jobs and ate convenience store soup. "You have been very fortunate," Marjorie said softly. "I have been very disciplined." "Because we gave you opportunities." "You gave Preston opportunities. You gave me invoices." She leaned closer. "This wedding matters. The Whitcombs are not ordinary people. Amara's family expects stability. Then they deserve honesty." That was the first time her smile slipped, only for a second. "Careful," she whispered. Before I could answer, Preston appeared beside us, carrying a glass of champagne and the expression of a man arriving to rescue everyone from my personality. "Viv," he said warmly, too loudly. "There you are." Several guests glanced over. He bent to kiss my cheek. I turned slightly, so his lips met air. His smile hardened. "Mom tells me you're making things difficult." "Mom handed me your catering bill." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "It's a temporary liquidity issue. You work in finance. I'd think you would understand timing." "I understand default language, too." His eyes flicked. 1 second. Less than one. But I caught it. Then he widened his smile for the room. "This is what I mean. Always so dramatic. It's my rehearsal dinner, Viv. Can you not turn one family request into a courtroom deposition?" "A family request is asking me to pass the salt. This is $80,000. Preston lowered his voice. "You have the money." "So do you, apparently. That is what everyone here believes." His jaw tightened. My mother touched his arm, not to comfort him, but to remind him to perform. He took the cue beautifully. His shoulders dropped. His face softened. He became the wounded brother. "I know you've always resented my success," he said. "But this weekend is not about your feelings. It's about family. A loving sister would help." There it was. The old trick. Put the knife in my hand and call the wound proof that I was violent. Before I could answer, a woman's voice said, "Is everything all right?" Amara Whitcomb stood behind Preston in a pale blue dress, graceful, composed, and genuinely concerned. That was what made it worse. Preston turned immediately. "Of course, sweetheart." Amara looked at me, then at the folder. Vivian, right? I'm glad you came. Her warmth was cautious but not fake. She had been warned about me. Difficult sister, jealous sister, cold sister. Congratulations, I said. Thank you. She glanced between us again. I hope there isn't a problem. No problem, Preston said. My mother smiled. Just family logistics. Amara nodded slowly. My family can be intense too. Weddings bring out everyone's stress. But we believe in showing up for each other, especially during important moments. She did not say it cruelly. That was the part that hurt. For one brief second, I wanted to tell her everything. That showing up had been my full-time job since childhood. That I had shown up with money, labor, silence, signatures, excuses. That my family did not want support. They wanted access. But Amara was looking at me like a decent person asking for decency. And Preston was looking at me like he had won. I opened the folder again, took out the invoice, and removed my black card from my wallet. Preston's smile returned in full. Thank you, he said. I knew you'd come through. I held the card between two fingers and looked at my mother first, then my brother. This is the last time, Preston chuckled. Vivian, no. My voice stayed quiet. That made him listen. I am paying this because I refuse to let the staff suffer for your performance. I am not paying it because I believe you. I am not paying it because I owe you. And after tonight, I am done being the account you access when your image overdrafts. My mother's eyes went flat. Preston leaned in. Don't embarrass yourself. I'm not the one who can't cover dinner. For the first time that evening, his charm cracked wide enough for something ugly to show through. Then Amara touched his sleeve, and he repaired himself instantly. The catering manager appeared with a discreet handheld terminal. I signed the payment authorization with a steady hand. That steadiness cost me more than the money. When it was done, Preston lifted his glass. To family, he said. I looked at the champagne tower, all those fragile glasses stacked into a monument to balance. To final payments, I replied. My mother stood. Enjoy your dinner, Vivian. She said my name like it was something she had found on the bottom of her shoe. Preston followed her, but not before setting his champagne down at my table to adjust his cufflink. His phone was in his other hand. It lit up. He did not notice at first. I did. The notification banner flashed across the screen before dimming. Federal Banking Compliance Division. Emergency Asset Review Request. Hale Properties. P. Hale. My body did not move. Not my eyes, not my hand, not my breath. Years of sitting across from hostile sellers, panicked borrowers, and men who thought anger could substitute for documentation had trained me well. I knew how not to react when someone accidentally showed me the thing they were trying to hide. Preston picked up the phone, saw the screen, and went very still. Then he locked it and smiled at me. It was the worst smile I had ever seen on him. Not because it was cruel, because it was afraid. Enjoy the lobster, he said. I will, I answered. He walked away too quickly. I sat there near the service corridor with my water glass untouched and an $80,000 receipt cooling beside my plate, watching my brother return to his kingdom of chandeliers and borrowed applause. That was when I understood. The bill in my lap had never been about catering. It was about panic. Preston was not experiencing a cash flow delay. He was bleeding. My parents knew it. He knew it. And whatever he had promised the Whitcomb family was large enough to bring federal banking compliance sniffing around on the eve of his wedding. I folded the receipt once and placed it in my purse. They all thought I had just paid for lobster. They had no idea I had already bought the debt under his empire. The next morning, the date looked innocent. That was the cruel thing about wealth. It could cover rot with flowers. I arrived early because I had learned long ago that my family was most dangerous before an audience appeared. In public, they performed. In private, they negotiated with knives. The bridal suite was on the second floor, facing the water. When I passed the open door, I saw Amara surrounded by silk robes, makeup brushes, laughter, and women holding champagne flutes they were too nervous to drink from. She looked beautiful in that almost painful way brides can look before disaster reaches them. For 1 second, guilt caught me in the ribs. She was not my enemy. Amara saw me at the doorway and waved. "Vivian," she said warmly. "I'm glad you came early." I stepped inside just far enough to be polite. "You look beautiful." Her smile softened. "Thank you. I know last night was tense." "That wasn't your fault." She studied me, maybe hearing what I did not say. Before she could answer, my mother appeared behind me. "Vivian," Marjorie said, "your father and I need a moment." Her hand closed around my elbow. Not hard enough to bruise, hard enough to remind me that she believed my body still belonged to family management. I let her guide me down the hall. Conrad stood outside a small sitting room beside the bridal suite. The room had a marble vanity, a silver coffee tray no one had touched, and one narrow window overlooking the service drive. When I stepped inside, my father closed the door behind us. The click of the latch sounded louder than it should have. On the vanity sat a legal folder. Not leather this time. Black, thick, organized. My mother stood beside it as if she were presenting a wedding gift. "We are not doing another invoice," I said. Conrad's mouth tightened. "Do not start with that tone." "I have several tones. This is the generous one." Marjorie opened the folder. "We need you to sign a few documents before the ceremony." I laughed once, not because it was funny, because sometimes your body chooses the only sound left. "No, you have not even looked." "I don't need to look to know I'm not signing anything in a locked room on my brother's wedding morning." "It is not locked," Conrad said. He did not move away from the door. My mother lifted the first page and turned it toward me. "This is a symbolic transfer of your remaining non-managing interest in Hale Properties." There it was, 30%. The last official piece of a company I had left years earlier, but had never fully been allowed to separate from, because my parents liked having my name available when convenient. No authority, no salary, no respect. Just enough paper connection to be useful if creditors came asking who had benefited from Hale family stability. I looked at the stack. What else? Marjorie's eyes flickered. She had expected resistance, not comprehension. "A governance resolution," she said. "What else?" "A family trust amendment." "What else?" Conrad stepped forward. "You are not in a position to interrogate us." "I'm exactly in that position if you want my signature." My mother exhaled through her nose. "There is also a waiver acknowledging historical obligations connected to the company, drafted only to maintain continuity during Preston's transition as principal operator." I stared at her. There are moments when language becomes so polished it turns transparent. Historical obligations, continuity, transition, principal operator. They were not asking me to give Preston a wedding gift. They were trying to make me a liability sponge. If I signed, Preston could use my former equity, my professional reputation, and my family name to support whatever refinancing fantasy he had promised the Whitcombs and their banks. Worse, the waiver was worded broadly enough to suggest I had accepted knowledge of past obligations. It would not automatically make me guilty, but it would drag me into the mud long enough to serve their purpose. I touched the edge of the paper. "Who drafted this?" Our attorney, Conrad said. Which one? Family counsel. That is not a name. Marjorie smiled thinly. Always so difficult. No, I said. Specific. My father's voice dropped. You will sign. Why now? Marjorie folded her hands. Because Amara's family believes in unity. Her father expects Preston's financial position to reflect the strength he has represented. This transfer shows confidence. It shows that the Hale family stands behind Preston. It shows that you need my name. It shows you support your brother. No. It shows Preston is short on something he promised. My mother's composure cracked. You cannot bear that he is loved, she snapped. I can bear a lot, I said. I cannot bear fraud. The room changed. Conrad moved first. Watch your mouth. Marjorie's face went pale with fury. How dare you bring that word into this room? How dare you bring me documents that try to wrap my name around Preston's collapse? Then she slapped me. It was not dramatic. Not like movies. No gasp, no echo, no handprint appearing instantly. Just a sharp crack and the sting of her ring against my cheek. For 1 second, I was 14 again. Then, I was not. I turned my face back slowly. Marjorie looked shocked, not because she had hit me, but because she had lost control while doing it. Conrad said nothing. I touched my cheek with 2 fingers. My skin burned. Feel better? I asked. My mother's lips parted. You ungrateful little... No. My voice came out cold enough to stop her. We are done pretending this is about family. Conrad pointed toward the documents. If you walk out without signing, you are finished. We will remove you from the trust. We will remove your name from every family structure. Preston will be named sole successor, sole operator, and public head of Hale Properties. You will not receive $1, 1 property, 1 sentimental photograph. You will be erased. There it was, the threat they thought would break me. For years, some wounded part of me had been terrified of that word. Erased, removed, cut out, disowned. They had trained me to believe exile was the worst punishment a family could deliver. But that morning, standing in a marble side room with legal documents on the vanity and my cheek still burning, the little girl inside me went quiet. The CEO listened instead. Removed from the trust, name taken off family structures. Preston confirmed as sole operator, publicly, in writing. My father thought he was describing punishment. He was describing evidence. For months, my firm had maintained records showing I was not part of Hale Properties operations. I had not signed Preston's new financing documents. I had not authorized his transfers. I had not approved his valuations. My family had now tried to pressure me into accepting liability, and I had refused. If they created clean, notarized documents confirming that Preston and my parents controlled everything, those documents would not magically erase every legal question. Law does not work like fairy dust. But they would strengthen the wall I had already built. They would prove separation. They would prove intent. They would prove they wanted my name only after the fire had started. So I let my face fall still. You're serious? I asked quietly. Marjorie mistook my calm for fear. I saw relief touch her eyes. Very, she said. I looked at Conrad. You would publicly disown me at your son's wedding? If that is what it takes to protect this family, he said. I almost smiled. This family. The phrase had always meant them when glory was available and me when payment was due. Then put it in writing, I said. My mother blinked. What? You heard me. If I am being removed, I want formal documents. Not a tantrum, not a threat, a notarized trust amendment, a corporate resolution, a written declaration that Preston Hale is sole operator and successor. A statement that I hold no managerial authority and have not participated in recent financing decisions. Conrad narrowed his eyes. You think this is a negotiation? No, I think it is a record. Marjorie recovered enough to sneer. You want proof that your own family rejected you? I want accuracy. You will regret asking for humiliation. I've survived yours for 34 years. I'm curious what paperwork adds. Marjorie closed the folder with a decisive snap. Fine, she said. You want it formal? We will make it formal. At the reception, in front of everyone, we will make it clear exactly where you stand. Good. That word unsettled her. Preston entered then without knocking. He was half dressed for the ceremony, white shirt open at the collar, cufflinks in one hand, phone in the other. His face carried the tight impatience of a man watching time run out. Is it done? He asked. No one answered quickly enough. His eyes moved from the documents to my face. He saw the redness on my cheek. Something like satisfaction flickered through him before he hid it. Vivian, he said, don't make this ugly. It already is. He stepped closer. You always wanted a seat at the table. We're offering you a graceful way to leave it. I remembered him at 19, leaning against the car my debt had helped buy. The market doesn't care about your feelings, Viv. I looked at his open collar, his shaking thumb, the phone he kept clutching like it could still save him. No, I said. You're offering me a chance to watch you sign your own name. His smile faltered. From the hallway, someone called that the photographer was ready. My mother smoothed her dress, restoring herself piece by piece. The society mother returned. The slap disappeared behind lipstick and posture. Go sit where you have been placed, she said, and do not test me again today. I walked to the door. Conrad moved aside slowly, as if granting passage instead of losing control. Before I left, I turned back. One more thing, I said. Make sure the notary seal is clean. My mother's eyes sharpened. Why? Because if you're going to cut me off, I said, I'd hate for it to look sloppy. Then I opened the door and stepped back into the hallway of flowers, silk, and bridal laughter. My cheek still burned. My hands did not shake. When my father threatened to erase me from the family, the little girl inside me should have panicked. Instead, the woman I had become heard only one thing: release of liability. They thought they were cutting me off. What they were really doing was cutting me free. By noon, the estate had been transformed into a fantasy designed to make lies look sacred. White chairs lined the lawn in perfect rows, facing an arch wrapped in roses and pale linen. Beyond it, the Atlantic moved under a clean blue sky, bright enough to hurt the eyes. A string quartet played near the hedges. Guests drifted across the grass in summer suits, silk dresses, and the careful expressions of people who knew they were being watched. My seat was in the back, not simply behind the extended family, behind a cluster of second cousins, two elderly neighbors my mother barely tolerated, and close enough to the catering entrance that I could hear staff discussing ice buckets. It was deliberate. Marjorie did not waste details. A place card with my name sat on the chair, as if it had been politely assigned by chance. Vivian Hale, back row, near the servants. Visible enough to be humiliated, not important enough to be honored. I sat. That disappointed them more than any protest would have. A younger version of me would have felt the burn of it. She would have counted the distance between her chair and the front row like it measured her worth. She would have watched Preston stand under the arch and wondered why love had always been arranged around him like flowers. But I was not 22 anymore. I was 34, my cheek still faintly sore from my mother's hand, my purse heavier with copies of messages, and my mind already building a timeline. The folder from the morning mattered. The public threat mattered. Preston's compliance alert mattered. The $80,000 catering bill mattered. One detail alone could be dismissed as family chaos. Together, they formed a shape. A fraud has a rhythm before it collapses. First, appearance becomes expensive. Then liquidity disappears. Then pressure moves inward toward the people least likely to say no. Finally, someone gets asked to sign something in a hurry. I had seen it dozens of times. I had never seen it in a wedding dress before. "May I sit here?" The voice beside me was low, calm, and educated in the old-fashioned way, each word chosen before it was released. I turned. Judge Elias Whitcomb stood beside the empty chair to my left. I recognized him immediately, although he looked less intimidating in a dark suit with a boutonniere than he did in the photographs attached to legal profiles. Silver hair, straight posture, watchful eyes, not suspicious exactly. Worse than suspicious, patient. "Of course," I said. He sat carefully, glancing toward the front where Amara's bridesmaids were gathering. "I needed a minute before I walked my daughter down that aisle," he said. "Apparently retirement does not prepare a man for that." "No," I said. "I imagine it does not." He looked at me then, directly. "Vivian Hale." It was not a question. "Yes, I have heard your name." "I'm sure you have." A faint smile touched his mouth. "Not only from Preston." That surprised me. He continued, "A former clerk of mine works in restructuring. She mentioned your firm once, said you had a reputation for being precise." Precise. Not difficult, not bitter, not cold. Precise. It was such a small word, it nearly undid me more than the back row seat. "People usually say that when they mean unpleasant," I said. "In my experience, unpleasant people are rarely as useful as precise ones." The quartet shifted into something softer. Guests began taking their seats. Judge Whitcomb's eyes followed Amara's mother as she moved toward the front row. I hope I am not overstepping by saying this, but families become strange around weddings. That is one word for it. He heard the restraint in my answer. "I looked into Preston," he said quietly. My hands remained folded in my lap. "That seems wise. Amara is my only daughter. She is intelligent, but intelligence is not armor. People confuse the two." He paused. "My team reviewed the obvious things: litigation history, property records, corporate filings, tax liens, public debt indicators. Nothing alarming came back." "Nothing obvious came back," I said. His head turned slightly. I should have stopped there. That would have been safer, cleaner. I had no desire to become the bitter sister whispering poison before vows. If I accused Preston without enough visible evidence, he would use my warning as proof of jealousy. My parents would call me unstable. Amara might reject the truth before she was ready to hear it. But then Judge Whitcomb said, "He recently approached me about a bridge facility connected to a Manhattan expansion." The air seemed to tighten around the chairs. "What size facility?" I asked. 10 million? I looked toward the arch. Preston stood there laughing with one of his groomsmen, adjusting his cuff like a man with no debt in the world. "Has it funded?" I asked. Judge Whitcomb did not answer immediately. When he did, his voice was lower. "Not fully. It is in controlled escrow pending final verification." I introduced him to the bank. I did not personally release funds. That distinction mattered. Elias Whitcomb was too careful to place his own hands carelessly on money, but introductions from men like him could open doors that stayed locked for everyone else. "What collateral did he represent?" I asked. The judge watched me now the way judges watch witnesses who have accidentally become interesting. "A Manhattan mixed-use acquisition. Additional support from Hale Properties holdings. Some receivables. some commercial equity. There is no Manhattan expansion. I did not mean to say it that plainly. His expression did not change, but everything behind it sharpened. You know that? I know enough to ask questions. What questions? I looked forward. The photographer had taken his place near the aisle. Preston's smile was flawless. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, rehearsing tenderness. Which properties? I asked. Which escrow bank? Which title company? Which valuation firm? Did your team verify collateral through county records and lender files, or through documents Preston provided? A breeze moved through the rose arch. Judge Whitcomb leaned back very slightly. That was when I knew he understood. Not the whole thing, not yet, but enough to realize my questions were not emotional. They were technical, specific, dangerous. If you know something, he said, now would be the time. I thought of Amara upstairs, smiling in silk while makeup artists fastened pins into her hair. I thought of the trust documents in the morning, the waiver language, the slap, the threat. I thought of my family's talent for turning silence into consent. I am not asking you to believe me, I said. I am asking you not to release $1 until every piece of collateral is verified directly from independent records. Not PDFs, not letters, not statements Preston forwarded, county records, existing line holders, direct bank confirmation. His eyes moved to Preston. Are you warning me as his sister or as a creditor? The question was quiet enough that no one else heard it. It's also sharp enough to cut. For a moment, I said nothing. Then I answered honestly. As someone who has learned that family language is often used to hide financial panic. Judge Whitcomb looked at me for a long second. Then he removed his phone. He did not panic. He did not stand and stop the ceremony. He simply typed a message with the composed efficiency of a man who had spent decades understanding that timing could preserve evidence or destroy it. What are you doing? I asked, delaying anything that can still be delayed. From the front, the planner signaled that the ceremony was ready to begin. Judge Whitcomb stood. For the first time since he sat down, I saw the father instead of the judge. His eyes found Amara at the far end of the lawn, just visible beyond the hedges, surrounded by bridesmaids in pale green. His face softened, then tightened again around a grief he did not yet have permission to feel. I appreciate precision, Ms. Hale, he said. Vivian, he nodded once, stay close. Then he walked away to take his daughter's arm. I remained in the back row as 500 people rose. Amara appeared at the aisle with her hand tucked into her father's elbow. She was radiant, truly radiant, not because of the gown or the flowers or the old money watching from the front rows, because she believed in that moment that she was walking toward a future honestly offered. That was the tragedy of it. Preston looked at her as if he adored her. Maybe he did. In whatever limited way men like Preston love people. Maybe he loved the way she looked at him. Maybe he loved the doors her name opened. Maybe he loved the version of himself reflected in her belief. The officiant spoke about trust. I nearly laughed, not because it was funny, because my brother repeated the word with his hand over his heart, while federal banking compliance had already placed his name under emergency review. He promised to protect her. I opened my phone, not obviously, not dramatically, just enough to send one message to Mara Keene, my lead paralegal and compliance coordinator. Pull Hale Properties file, prepare emergency default review, preservation letters, and escrow objection options. Possible active fraud exposure tied to Preston Hale and Whitcomb connected bridge facility. Stand by. I watched the message deliver. Then I looked up in time to see Preston place the ring on Amara's finger. The guests applauded. My mother cried beautifully. My father smiled like a man whose investment had matured. And Judge Elias Whitcomb watched his new son-in-law with the expression of a man silently revising a verdict. That was the moment the story stopped being about a toxic family and became a federal crime scene wearing white roses. While my brother promised to protect his bride, I sent the message that would make sure no one protected him. Most people think destruction begins with noise. A scream, a crash, a door kicked open, a man in handcuffs, a bride crying in front of 500 guests. That is not true. Destruction begins quietly. Sometimes it begins with a woman sitting in the back row of her brother's wedding, holding her phone low in her lap while violins play, sending one message to the only person who knows where every file is buried. Mara Keene answered in less than 30 seconds. On it. Pulling Hale Properties file now. Are you safe? That question almost made me laugh. Not because it was funny, because safety had always meant something different around my family. I was physically safe, yes, surrounded by white chairs, ocean air, polite guests, and flowers expensive enough to feed a household for a month. No one was pointing a weapon at me. No one was dragging me out of the ceremony. But my family had spent the morning trying to wrap my name around whatever financial corpse Preston had hidden under his tuxedo. So I typed back, physically safe, legally threatened, possible active fraud tied to Preston Hale Bridge Facility. Need full file status, debt position, and emergency options. The officiant was speaking about devotion. Mara sent back, give me 5. I looked up. Preston stood beneath the rose arch, his face turned toward Amara as if she were the only person in the world. He had always been good at that, making people feel chosen while quietly calculating what their belief could buy him. Amara held his hands and smiled. That was the part that made my chest tighten. She looked happy, not greedy, not stupid, not like a woman chasing a rich man. She looked like a woman who had been sold a beautiful future by someone who understood exactly how to forge hope. My phone buzzed again. Mara. Confirming our firm acquired Hale Properties debt package 3 months ago. Total outstanding principal approx. 20.4 M across multiple commercial loans. Several matured or in payment default. Cross-collateralized. Collateral includes Newport estate interest, 2 commercial buildings, vehicles registered to company entities, business accounts, and receivables. I read it twice, though I already knew the shape of it. $20 million. My family had always liked numbers when they were decorative. Square footage, guest count, valuation, net worth, donation amount. They loved numbers that made them look chosen. They hated numbers that told the truth. I typed, personal exposure? Mara replied, based on current records, limited. You are listed historically as non-managing interest holder, no signature on recent refinance docs, no signature on bridge materials we have seen, resignation and distancing records preserved. Need to document today's coercion attempt immediately. I closed my eyes for half a second. There it was, the line between fear and action. I had spent years preparing for this exact category of disaster, but preparation does not make betrayal painless. It only gives pain somewhere useful to go. The officiant said, marriage is built on trust. Preston repeated the word trust with absolute confidence. My phone felt heavy in my palm. I typed, this morning, Marjorie and Conrad attempted to force signature on transfer of 30% non-managing interest, governance resolution, trust amendment, historical obligations waiver. I refused. Marjorie struck me. Conrad threatened public removal from trust and family structures. They intend to present notarized removal documents at reception. Preserve this summary as contemporaneous note. Mara's answer came back fast. Understood. Preserve all texts from Marjorie/Conrad Preston. Photograph any visible injury if possible. Do not engage verbally without witness. If they produce documents, retain originals if voluntarily handed to you. Do not sign anything. I almost smiled. Do not sign anything. As if I needed the reminder. But that was why Mara was good. She did not assume intelligence replaced procedure. Smart people made mistakes when wounded. Careful people survived. I turned slightly and lifted my phone as if checking the camera. The screen reflected my face. My makeup had covered most of the redness, but not all. Along my cheekbone, where my mother's ring had caught skin, there was still a faint mark, pale but present. I took 3 photos, not because I wanted sympathy, because evidence does not care whether you feel embarrassed. Mara sent another message. Emergency options. We can file notices of default electronically where allowed and prepare service packets for Monday delivery. We can also send lender alerts and fraud risk notices to associated institutions today. Escrow objection letter can go to any identified escrow bank if we can confirm facility details. Preservation letters can go to relevant parties. This will not summon agents, but it will trigger compliance flags, release holds, fraud department review, credit freezes, and record preservation. That was exactly what I needed. Not theater, pressure. The kind that moved through systems before people had time to charm their way around it. I glanced toward Judge Whitcomb, who stood beside Amara now, having given her away. His posture was perfect, but his expression had changed. He was present, but no longer relaxed. A man who had entered the ceremony as a father was now standing there as a former federal judge listening for perjury in a love vow. Good. He had heard enough. Now the records needed to move. I typed, prepare default notices, prepare escrow objection, prepare preservation letters, prepare lender alerts, include concern that borrower may be representing collateral inconsistent with existing lien and county records. Do not overstate. Use verified facts only. Mara replied, understood. Need authorization to initiate. My thumb hovered over the screen. That was the moment. People never understand when they hear a story. After it has already become inevitable. They think there is one clean moral path. They think you either expose the lie immediately or become part of it. They think hesitation means weakness. It does not. Hesitation means you still understand consequences. If I authorized Mara, I would not simply embarrass Preston. I would start a chain reaction through banks, lawyers, compliance departments, title companies, and eventually law enforcement. I would freeze money. I would expose documents. I would put my parents' company under a light bright enough to show every forged signature and inflated valuation. And I would do it during a wedding. A real woman was standing at the altar, wearing a ring my brother had no moral right to place on her finger. If I waited, maybe I could spare her public humiliation for a few hours. If I waited, Preston might secure the next release of funds. If I waited, Amara's family might become financially entangled. If I waited, my parents might drag my name onto paper before the collapse. That was the trap family always sets for the scapegoat. They make you choose between protecting yourself and looking cruel. Amara laughed softly at something Preston whispered. I watched her face and felt the last of my hesitation die. Cruel would be letting her marry a financial crime, because the truth was inconveniently timed. I typed one word, proceed. Then I turned my phone screen down on my lap and listened to the ocean. Nothing happened. No thunder, no screaming, no officers marching across the lawn. Preston did not suddenly confess. My mother did not faint into the roses. The string quartet kept playing. The guests kept smiling. That is how real consequences begin. Invisible. Mara's next messages arrived in controlled bursts. Notice package being assembled. Debt acquisition records attached to internal packet. Preparing clean summary for external review. Drafting escrow objection template. Checking entity names against county records. Pulling prior resignation correspondence. Preserving your contemporaneous statement. Searching for bridge facility identifiers. I read each one with the calm of a woman counting locks on a door. The officiant asked Preston if he would honor and protect Amara. I will, Preston said. His voice carried beautifully. I wondered if his lies sounded different to him. If, somewhere inside, he knew the words had become performance, or if he had told so many lies for so long that truth felt like an insult when it arrived. My phone buzzed again. Mara. Need any detail on escrow bank title company from Whitcomb side? I looked toward Judge Whitcomb. His phone was in his hand now, low and discreet. He typed without looking down for long, then he slipped it back into his jacket. He had moved too. That mattered. I did not know whom he had contacted. A former colleague, a bank officer, a lawyer, someone who could touch the escrow file from the other side. But his timing confirmed what I suspected. He was not waiting for my family's permission to verify reality. The ceremony continued. Amara repeated vows about honesty. The word landed in the air and stayed there. I typed, Elias may be independently reviewing escrow. Do not contact Whitcomb directly until authorized. Prepare evidence packet for Amara/Elias if needed. Default status, debt acquisition records, collateral map, discrepancy list, forged valuation comparison if verified, and concise timeline. Mara replied, will prepare. Red folder or digital only? I stared at the message. Mara knew me too well. Digital records were clean, efficient, time-stamped. But weddings were physical events. Rooms moved faster than inboxes. People grabbed phones. Wi-Fi failed. Panic made passwords disappear. A physical packet could be opened in front of witnesses. A physical packet could not be deleted by Preston's thumb. I typed both. Have courier bring physical packet to estate. Red seal. Mark confidential attorney compliance review. Deliver to me only. Mara answered, courier can arrive before reception. Confirming. For the first time all day, my breathing loosened. Not because the danger had passed, because the danger finally had direction. Preston and Amara turned toward the guests as the officiant announced them husband and wife. Applause rose across the lawn like a wave. My mother cried into a lace handkerchief. Conrad clapped with the grave satisfaction of a man watching an acquisition close. Preston leaned in and kissed Amara. The crowd cheered. At that exact moment, my phone buzzed again. Mara. Authorization received. Notices moving. Alerts queued. Preservation letters queued. Escrow objection being finalized pending facility confirmation. I looked at Preston over the heads of 500 applauding people. He lifted Amara's hand to show the ring. My brother thought the kiss sealed his future. He did not know the first warning letters were already moving through the banking system. The guests stood and began drifting toward the cocktail terrace. Waiters appeared with trays of champagne. Music swelled. The photographer called for family portraits near the Rose Arch. My mother turned and searched for me in the back row. When she found me, her eyes were cold and triumphant. She still believed the reception would be my punishment. She still believed the documents would humiliate me. She still believed that cutting me off in public would remind everyone that Preston was the heir and I was the problem. I stood slowly, smoothing my dress. My phone buzzed one last time before I placed it in my purse. Mara. Evidence packet in progress. Courier en route. You'll have it before toasts. I looked at my mother, then at Preston, then at Amara, who was laughing as rose petals fell around her shoulders. People think revenge is rage. They imagine fire in the blood, broken glass, a voice raised high enough to shake the chandeliers. But real revenge is documentation, timing, chain of custody, a clean file, a preserved message, a notice delivered to the correct institution before the liar realizes the door behind him has locked. By the time Preston kissed his bride, the first domino had already fallen. By the time the crowd lifted champagne to celebrate him, the system had begun asking questions his charm could not answer. And by the time the reception doors opened, the truth was on its way to me in a red-sealed envelope. The reception took place inside a glass conservatory built against the eastern side of the estate, where the ocean became decoration and every surface reflected money. White silk draped from the ceiling in soft waves. Crystal chandeliers hung above the tables like frozen rain. A 10-tier wedding cake stood near the dance floor, guarded by flowers and lighting, as if it were a sacred monument. In the center of the room, an ice sculpture of the Hale family crest glittered beneath blue-white spotlights. 500 guests moved through the room, carrying champagne, compliments, and assumptions. They assumed Preston was rich. They assumed Amara was safe. They assumed my family's elegance meant stability. That was how people like Preston survived. They understood that most people do not investigate beauty. They admire it. I stood near the entrance for a moment and watched the performance begin. Preston and Amara were announced like royalty. The jazz band shifted into something brighter. Guests applauded as they stepped through the double doors. Amara glowing in white satin. Preston beside her with one hand at the small of her back, smiling as though the world had been built to confirm him. My brother had always known how to enter a room, but now I knew how to read the parts of him other people missed. His shoulders were too high. His smile came half a second late. He checked the right side of the room before the left, searching not for friends, but for threats. When a waiter passed too close, Preston flinched just enough for me to see the man under the tuxedo. Panic had followed him into the conservatory. My mother saw none of it, or chose not to. Marjorie floated behind the receiving line, accepting praise for the flowers, the menu, the music, the entire production. She wore humiliation like perfume when it belonged to someone else. Tonight, she believed mine was about to make her radiant. My father stood near the bar, speaking with 3 men in navy suits. He laughed at something one of them said, but his eyes kept returning to Preston. No one was relaxed. That should have comforted me. It did not. Because a cornered fraud is more dangerous than a confident one. I found my assigned table near the side wall, not as close to the service entrance this time, but still far enough from the family tables to make the message clear. I sat between a distant aunt who did not recognize me and a real estate broker who spent 10 minutes explaining interest rates to me after I told him what I did for a living. Then Preston appeared. He brought Amara with him. "Viv," he said, spreading his arms slightly as if approaching a difficult but beloved relative. "There you are. I wanted to thank you personally for last night." Amara smiled politely. "Preston told me you helped with a vendor issue." "A cash flow issue," Preston corrected quickly. I looked at him. "That is one way to describe an unpaid $80,000 catering balance." His smile held, but his eyes sharpened. Amara's smile faded a little. Preston laughed. Too loud. "My sister likes dramatic phrasing. Occupational hazard, I guess. I prefer accurate phrasing." He leaned closer, still smiling for anyone watching. Careful. I turned to Amara. Has Preston finalized escrow verification on the Manhattan expansion? The color changed in his face. It was subtle. A small draining around the mouth, a flicker in the eyes. But Amara saw it. Escrow? She asked. Preston recovered quickly. Business details. Nothing for you to worry about tonight? Actually, I said, financial disclosures are exactly the kind of thing a spouse should worry about before assets become shared problems. His hand tightened around his champagne flute. Amara looked from me to him. Preston? He kissed her temple. Vivian is being Vivian. She has always had a complicated relationship with my success. I almost admired the speed of it. Not denial, reframing. Make the issue emotional before anyone can examine the facts. But Amara did not look away from him as quickly as she had the night before. She watched him place his phone face down on the table. She watched him glance toward her father. She watched his laugh arrive a little too late when someone called his name from the dance floor. Doubt does not need proof at first. It only needs a crack. I hope your disclosures are clean, I said. Preston's voice dropped. This is my wedding. Yes, I said. That is what makes the timing so unfortunate. For a second, I thought he might break right there. Then my mother's voice drifted from behind him. Preston, darling, your cousins want a photograph. He stepped back immediately, grateful for the rescue. We'll talk later. No, I said. We probably won't. His smile vanished. Then he turned, taking Amara's hand, and led her away. But Amara looked back once, not at me, at his phone. 20 minutes later, the first call came. I saw Preston take it near the windows. He turned away from the room, one hand cupped over the phone, jaw working. A banker, maybe. A compliance officer. Someone who had received a notice, an alert, or a question he could not charm through the screen. He ended the call and immediately poured himself another drink. Amara noticed. So did Judge Whitcomb. Elias stood near the head table speaking with his wife, but his attention remained divided. He had the stillness of a man waiting for a report he expected to dislike. Twice he checked his phone. Once, he read something and placed the phone back into his jacket without expression. That kind of control frightened me more than anger. My own phone buzzed. Mara. Courier on site. Red packet delivered to estate staff per instructions. Awaiting pickup confirmation. I rose from my chair. A server guided me toward a side hallway where a young courier in a dark blazer waited with a flat red-sealed envelope. He asked for identification, checked my signature, and left without a word. The envelope was heavier than it looked. Inside were copies, clean summaries, notices, debt acquisition records, collateral maps, discrepancy charts, enough to begin the truth, not enough to overload the first reader. Mara understood the art of evidence. The first page had to make someone want the second. I returned to the reception with the envelope inside my purse. The toasts began after dinner. Conrad went first. He walked to the microphone with a glass of scotch in one hand and the confidence of a man who believed microphones belonged to him. The band quieted. Guests settled. Cameras lifted. My friends, he began, tonight is not only a celebration of marriage, it is a celebration of legacy. Of course it was. Conrad spoke of family history, perseverance, the courage to build, the responsibility of inheritance. He praised Preston's vision. He praised Amara's grace. He praised the Whitcomb family's dignity and said the union represented not merely love, but shared values. He did not mention me, not once. He spoke of his son as the future of Hale Properties, the steward of everything that had come before, the man who would lead the family into its next chapter. Every word was useful. Every word placed Preston in control. I sat very still and let him build my case in front of witnesses. When Conrad finished, the room applauded. Preston stood and embraced him. Father and son, legacy and heir, a photograph waiting to become evidence. Then Marjorie rose. If my father's weapon was authority, my mother's was grief. She did not take the microphone like a conqueror. She accepted it with both hands and a trembling smile, as though emotion had almost overwhelmed her. The room softened immediately. People loved a beautiful mother pretending to be fragile. "My sweet Preston," she said, touching her heart. "From the moment you were born, I knew you were meant to carry something extraordinary." Preston bowed his head modestly. I watched Amara watch him. Marjorie praised his kindness, his ambition, his devotion to family. She called him the kind of son who gave parents peace. She said Amara was gaining not only a husband, but a man rooted in loyalty. Then she paused. The room shifted with her. A practiced speaker knows how to make silence feel accidental. "There are moments," she said softly, "when a family must choose what future it will protect." My aunt beside me stopped cutting her cake. My father looked down into his glass. Preston's smile returned, small and satisfied. I knew then. Here it came. Marjorie continued, voice thick with manufactured heartbreak. "As many of you know, every family has wounds. Some can be healed with patience. Some, no matter how much love is offered, are deepened by bitterness." A few guests glanced around, hungry and embarrassed. My mother turned her face toward me. "Not fully, just enough. My husband and I have spent years trying to keep our family whole," she said. "But tonight, as we welcome Amara into the Hale family, we must also be honest about the values we are choosing to carry forward." There it was again. Values. The word people use when they want cruelty to sound moral. "Preston has always chosen loyalty," Marjorie said. "He has always chosen grace. He has always chosen to build rather than destroy." Amara's face had gone still. She understood now that this was not a toast. It was an execution. "And while it pains me deeply," Marjorie said, "there are those who have allowed resentment to guide them, those who mistake success for betrayal, those who would rather undermine family than celebrate it." The room was silent. My mother looked directly at me. "Vivian." Several people inhaled, not loudly, but all at once. A public humiliation is an odd thing. The room becomes both audience and accomplice. People do not stop it, because stopping it would require admitting what it is. Marjorie's eyes shone with perfect tears. "You have chosen bitterness over family for too long," she said. "And tonight, for the sake of our future, we release you from obligations you have clearly never valued." My father stood. He held the black folder from the morning. The folder. The one they thought would end me. Conrad walked towards my table while the room watched. Every step was slow enough to be ceremonial. Behind him, Preston's expression had softened into pity. He was enjoying this. My father stopped beside me and placed the folder on the table. "These documents," he said, loud enough for surrounding tables to hear, "confirm what should have been clear long ago. Preston Hale is the sole operator, successor, and representative of Hale Properties and the Hale Family Trust. Vivian Hale has no authority, no claim to leadership, and no place in our family's future." People stared. Phones lifted now, not openly, but enough. Amara rose halfway from her chair. "Conrad." Preston touched her arm. "Let them finish." That was his mistake. She looked at his hand as if noticing it for the first time. Conrad leaned down toward me. "You are no longer family," he said. "You should leave through the service entrance." There was the sentence. 34 years condensed to one command: leave through the service entrance. I looked at my father, at my mother standing near the microphone, tearful and triumphant, at Preston beside his bride, smiling like a man watching a debt get written off. Then I opened the folder, slowly. The first page was a trust amendment, signed by Conrad, signed by Marjorie, witnessed, notarized. The second was a corporate governance resolution naming Preston sole operator and principal representative of Hale Properties. The third removed me from family financial structures. The fourth declared that I held no active management authority and had not participated in current operational decisions. The fifth named Preston's successor to all Hale family business interests. It was better than I had asked for. My mother had always been thorough when cruelty had an audience. I reviewed each signature. Conrad Hale, Marjorie Hale, Preston Hale, notary seal, clean. I felt something inside me loosen. Not joy, recognition. They had finally put the truth on paper. I closed the folder, placed one hand on top of it, and looked up. "Thank you," I said. The room did not understand. My mother's expression flickered. Conrad blinked. "What?" "Thank you," I repeated. "This is very helpful." For the first time all weekend, Preston stopped smiling. Marjorie's tears vanished so quickly it was almost impressive. "Helpful?" she said. I stood, taking the folder with me. "You have no idea," I said. Preston stepped forward. "Vivian." There was warning in his voice now. Fear, too. "Good." I placed the black folder into my purse. Then, with deliberate care, I removed the red-sealed envelope. The color caught the room's attention. So did Preston's face. He went pale, not startled pale, not offended pale, recognizing doom pale. "What is that?" Amara asked. Preston moved before I answered. He crossed the space between us too quickly, reaching for the envelope. "Give me that." Judge Elias Whitcomb stepped between us. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "Do not touch her," he said. Preston froze. Every eye in the conservatory turned toward them. Elias held out his hand to me. "Vivian." I gave him the envelope. Preston's composure cracked. "This is family business." Amara moved beside her father. "Then why are you trying to keep it from your wife?" He looked at her then, and for 1 second the mask slipped completely. There was no wounded groom, no visionary, no misunderstood son. Only a desperate man watching control leave his hands. "Amara," he said softly, "you do not want to embarrass yourself." The room heard it. So did she. Her face changed, not into rage, into clarity. Elias handed the red envelope to his daughter. "You have the right to read anything that concerns your marriage and your finances." Marjorie stepped away from the microphone. "Judge Whitcomb, this is highly inappropriate." Elias looked at her. The room seemed to cool. "Madam," he said, "so was disowning your daughter during a wedding toast." A murmur passed through the conservatory. My mother flushed. Conrad said, "You are interfering in private family matters." "No," Amara said. Her voice was quiet, but the microphone near my mother still caught enough of it to carry. She looked down at the red seal. "If this affects the money Preston asked my father to help secure, then it is not private." Preston whispered her name. She did not look at him. With slow hands, Amara broke the seal. The sound was small, paper tearing, that was all. But Preston reacted as if the floor had opened beneath him. My mother had spent my entire life waiting for the moment I would beg her not to abandon me. She had imagined tears, pleading, a daughter humiliated into obedience while the room politely looked away. Instead, she had handed me a notarized exit from a burning building. Now her new daughter-in-law stood under crystal chandeliers, opening the truth in front of 500 witnesses. When Amara broke the red seal, Preston stopped looking like a groom. He looked like a man hearing the lock click shut. Amara did not cry when she opened the envelope. That was the first thing I noticed. Her fingers shook once as the red seal tore. But after that, something inside her settled. Not peace, not calm, something harder. The kind of stillness a person finds when panic would be too expensive. Judge Whitcomb stood beside her, close enough to support, far enough not to control. That told me something about him. He did not snatch the papers from his daughter's hand. He did not decide what she could bear. He let her read. Preston watched the pages like they were weapons pointed at his throat. Because they were. The first page was simple. Mara knew better than to begin with dense legal language. It was a summary sheet, dated, clean, and brutal. Hale Properties Holdings carried approximately $20 million in defaulted commercial debt. Several loans had matured without repayment. Multiple properties Preston had represented as family equity were already pledged as collateral. Certain accounts connected to Hale entities had been restricted for review. The room was silent enough that I could hear the ice sculpture dripping into its silver tray. Amara read the first page once, then again. Then she looked at Preston. "What is this?" He gave her the face first, the wounded one. "Sweetheart, I don't know what Vivian has given you, but this is obviously meant to hurt me." Amara did not move. "Is Hale Properties in default?" Preston laughed softly, like the question itself was embarrassing. "Business debt is complex. Vivian knows that. She's twisting technicalities." "Is it in default?" His smile tightened. "Temporary liquidity pressure is not the same as—" "Yes," I said. Every head turned toward me. I had not intended to speak so soon, but I was done letting his vocabulary hide the facts. I kept my voice even. "Yes, Hale Properties is in default on multiple commercial obligations. My firm acquired the debt through proper channels 3 months ago." The room reacted in layers. First confusion, then whispers, then recognition. My father's face went dark red. "You bought our debt?" "Our lender sold it," I said. "My firm purchased it. That is how debt markets work." Marjorie looked as if I had announced I had stolen a family heirloom. "You had no right." "I had every legal right," Preston pointed at me. "This is exactly what I mean. She has been plotting against us." "No," I said. "I have been documenting against you." That landed differently. Amara turned back to the packet. The second section contained the collateral map, properties, loan numbers, existing liens, cross-collateralization notes. The kind of details Preston hated because charm became useless against them. She read more slowly now. Her face lost color, but not control. "This property," she said, touching one line. "You told me it was unencumbered." Preston moved closer. "It is effectively unencumbered." Judge Whitcomb's voice cut through the space. "That is not a legal category." Preston looked at him. "With respect, Elias, you are not seeing the full strategic picture." I almost felt sorry for him then. Almost. A man can lie to friends with tone. He can lie to lovers with intimacy. He can lie to strangers with confidence. But lying to a retired federal judge with a document in the room requires a level of arrogance that even Preston could not fully sustain. Amara turned the page. The third section was worse. Comparison of property valuations submitted in support of the proposed Manhattan Bridge facility against county records, lender files, and independent market data. Mara had labeled each discrepancy carefully. She did not write forged in dramatic red letters. She wrote unable to verify, inconsistent with recorded value, unsupported by lien position, document source discrepancy. Professional words. Devastating words. Amara's lips parted. The valuations Preston submitted to the escrow bank, I said, do not match the records tied to existing debt. The collateral he represented appears to be overstated, already pledged, or unverifiable. Preston snapped. Appears. You hear that? Appears. She's speculating. I am summarizing verified discrepancies. You are jealous. That old word again. Jealous. As if jealousy could create $20 million in defaulted obligations. As if bitterness could forge a valuation. As if a difficult sister could reach into county records and rearrange liens. Amara looked at him. Did you submit these documents? He looked offended. My team handles documents. Did you submit them? Amara, this is not how business works. That is not an answer. Marjorie stepped forward, voice trembling with outrage. This is grotesque. You are allowing Vivian to poison your marriage before the first dance. Amara did not look at her. Marjorie, she said, if the marriage can be poisoned by reading financial documents, then the poison was already there. A ripple passed through the room. My mother flinched as if Amara had slapped her. For one brief, selfish second, I loved her for that. Preston changed tactics. He reached for Amara's hand. Baby, listen to me. Vivian has hated me for years. She hates that I built something. She hates that Mom and Dad believed in me. She has always needed to make my success feel fake so she can live with her own bitterness. Amara pulled her hand back. It was a small movement. It destroyed him more than shouting would have. Judge Whitcomb removed a folded sheet from inside his jacket. I received confirmation 15 minutes ago, he said. Preston's eyes shot to him. The escrow release has been suspended pending review. The routing instructions submitted in connection with the bridge facility were flagged by the bank's fraud unit after discrepancies were raised. Amara went completely still. The money never left escrow? She asked. No, Elias said. It did not. For the first time, Preston looked truly afraid, not angry, not insulted, afraid. Elias, he said, you had no authority to interfere. Judge Whitcomb's gaze did not move. I had every right to ask a bank not to release funds on collateral that could not be independently verified. You humiliated me. No, Elias said. You appear to have attempted to use my daughter and my introduction to obtain money under false representations. The word attempted mattered. The judge knew exactly what he was saying. Preston heard it too. His face twisted. This is insane. Everyone is overreacting. Business is complicated. Vivian doesn't understand how development works. I let the silence hang for one beat. Then I said, this morning, my parents tried to force me to sign documents transferring my remaining non-managing interest in Hale Properties, along with a waiver acknowledging historical obligations. Conrad barked. Enough! No, I said. Not enough. They wanted my name useful for refinancing. They wanted my reputation available if Preston needed clean paper. When I refused, my mother slapped me and my father threatened to disown me publicly. Marjorie's eyes widened. How dare you? I turned toward the room, not loudly, but clearly. They did exactly that during the toast. In writing, notarized, signed by all three of them. Those documents name Preston sole operator and confirm I hold no current authority. Preston looked at my purse. He knew the black folder was there. He knew what they had handed me. For the first time all night, my father understood the shape of his own mistake. Marjorie did not fully. She was still trying to win the room. "This is private family business," she said, voice rising. "Every family has disagreements over money." Amara lifted the packet. "An attempted fraud involving my father's bank introduction is not private." A few guests gasped. There it was, the word my mother had been trying to avoid. Fraud. Once spoken aloud, it changed the room. People leaned back. Phones rose higher. The broker from my table began recording openly. Someone near the cake whispered, "Oh my God." Preston noticed the phones. That made him reckless. He lunged for the packet. Not far. Not violently enough to reach her, but fast enough that two estate security guards stepped forward. Judge Whitcomb moved first, blocking his path. "Do not," he said. Preston stopped with his hand still half raised. For 1 second, they looked like a portrait of two kinds of power. Preston, who had spent his life borrowing authority from rooms that wanted to believe him. Elias, who had earned authority by knowing when silence was more dangerous than speech. The conservatory doors opened. Two men entered first. Not police, not yet. They wore dark suits and the careful expressions of people trained to be polite during disaster. One spoke quietly to estate security. The other scanned the room and found Judge Whitcomb. Bank compliance. I knew the posture before anyone introduced them. Preston saw them too. His face collapsed. Not completely. Preston had too much vanity to fall apart all at once. But the surface gave way. The first man approached Judge Whitcomb and spoke low enough that only a few of us heard. "Sir, the fraud unit has requested that no involved parties leave until local authorities arrive. We have also been asked to preserve documents connected to the escrow review." The words moved through the room anyway. No involved parties leave. Local authorities preserve documents. Marjorie grabbed Conrad's sleeve. "What is happening?" she whispered. Conrad did not answer. He was staring at Preston like he had finally realized that the golden sun was not gold. He was painted debt. Preston backed up 1 step. "This is ridiculous. I'm calling my attorney." "That would be wise," Judge Whitcomb said. A uniformed officer entered through the same doors a moment later, accompanied by another member of estate security. He did not stride in dramatically. He did not shout. He did not draw attention to himself. That made it worse. A quiet officer in a room full of champagne is more terrifying than a loud one. He approached Elias first, then the bank compliance representatives. There was a brief exchange, too low for the room to hear. Papers were shown. A phone screen was turned. The officer looked at Preston. The jazz band had stopped playing. No one had told them to. They simply understood that music no longer belonged in the room. Amara still held the packet against her chest. Her wedding dress looked suddenly absurd beside the documents, like innocence standing too close to a ledger. Preston swallowed. "Amara, please." She looked at him for a long moment. "What else did you lie about?" He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. That was the first honest answer he had given her all day. The officer stepped closer and spoke quietly to Judge Whitcomb. Elias listened, then turned his eyes to Preston. His voice was controlled, almost gentle. "Preston," he said, "I would stop talking until your attorney is present." That sentence did what accusations could not. It made the room understand. This was no longer a family scandal. This was evidence. People say the truth sets you free. That night, the truth did more than that. It walked into the room wearing a badge. Then the ballroom doors opened again, and this time, no one mistook the men in dark suits for wedding guests. Amara arrived at my office 3 days after my parents were escorted out. She did make an appointment. That was the first difference. My assistant called me at 10:30 and said, "Miss Whitcomb is here." Not Mrs. Hale, Miss Whitcomb. Names matter after disasters. They tell you what someone is choosing to survive as. "Send her in," I said. When Amara walked through the door, she looked nothing like the bride from Newport. No satin, no veil, no diamond ring catching light like a lie. She wore a tailored navy suit, low heels, and her hair pulled back from a face that looked composed because it had run out of permission to break. There are kinds of exhaustion makeup cannot cover. Hers was one of them. I stood. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The last time we had stood in the same room, she had been holding a red sealed packet against her wedding dress while my brother was taken away in handcuffs. There is no polite social script for what comes after that. Finally, Amara said, "Thank you for seeing me." "Of course." She looked around my office, not with curiosity, but with a kind of sad recognition. Maybe she understood that this room had become a courtroom, a bunker, and a battlefield long before she entered it. "I owe you an apology," she said. "You don't." "I do." Her voice was controlled. "I believe the story they told about you." I said nothing. She looked at me directly. "Preston told me you were jealous. Your mother told me you were cold. Conrad told my father you had always been difficult around family success. And I was polite enough to believe there were two sides." "There were," I said. His lie and my silence. That hurt her, not because I meant to wound her, because she understood it was true. Amara lowered herself into the chair across from my desk. I should have asked better questions. Preston had professional answers. "I am not helpless, Vivian." "I know." "Then do not excuse me like I was." That was when I respected her. A weaker person would have wanted absolution first. Amara wanted accuracy. So I sat across from her and gave it to her. "You were deceived," I said. "That does not mean you were foolish. Preston did not walk into your life with obvious red flags and a cheap story. He brought documents, social proof, a respected family name, charitable boards, introductions, a clean-looking website. People who vouched for him because admitting they never checked would embarrass them too." She folded her hands in her lap. "My father said something similar." "Your father's right. He usually is. It is very irritating." For the first time, something almost like a smile touched her face. Then it disappeared. "If the escrow had released," she said, "my family would have been tied to him in a way that could have taken years to unwind. Yes, my personal trust was going to be part of the next conversation." I felt my expression change before I could stop it. She saw. "So, you did not know that part," she said. "No. He told me it was only to demonstrate liquidity for a larger acquisition. He said once the Manhattan deal closed, everything would be refinanced cleanly. He said involving my trust temporarily would show unity." Unity. There was that word again, the most expensive word in every toxic family's vocabulary. I leaned back slowly. "He was building a ladder." "To what?" "To your assets. Your father's credibility got him near the bank. Your marriage got him near your trust. The wedding got him 500 witnesses to the idea that Preston Hale was stable, beloved, and backed by old money." Amara looked toward the windows. Manhattan glittered behind her reflection, indifferent and sharp. "I keep replaying it," she said. "The vows. The first dance song we never used. My mother's face when the agents walked in. The ring hitting the glass. Her voice did not break. That almost made it worse." "I am sorry," I said. She turned back to me. "Are you?" "Yes. Even though he is your brother?" "Especially because he is my brother." She studied me for a long time. I thought you hated us all that night. No, I said. I hated that you had to learn the truth in public. I would rather have learned it in public than paid for it in private. That sentence stayed in the room. It deserved to. Then Amara opened the leather portfolio she had carried in with her. For one cold second, I thought of the black folders my family kept placing in front of me, all those documents disguised as duty. But Amara's hands were steady. She removed a slim packet and placed it on my desk. My father and several partners reviewed your firm. I looked at the packet, then at her. She continued, not casually, thoroughly. Your acquisition history, court records, recovery rates, compliance structure, conflicts policy, reputation with lenders, reputation with borrowers, which was harder to assess because apparently most people in default do not enjoy being professionally handled. I have been told that. This is not charity, she said. I did not assume it was. My father would be insulted if you did. He said you acted legally, decisively, and with more restraint than most people would have shown under personal attack. I did not know what to do with that sentence. Respect still felt suspicious when it arrived without an invoice attached. Amara touched the packet lightly. We are assembling an initial distressed asset portfolio, $100 million, commercial real estate, operating debt, several regional positions. My father and the partners want your firm to manage it. For a moment, the office became very quiet. 100 million. Not as a rescue, not as hush money, not as family obligation, as trust, professional trust. My parents had tried to use the Whitcomb name to inflate Preston's fake empire. They had humiliated me in front of that same family to make me look worthless. And now, the Whitcombs were sitting in my office offering my firm control of a portfolio 10 times larger than the bridge loan Preston had tried to manipulate. There was poetry in it, not gentle poetry, the kind carved into stone. Why bring this yourself? I asked. Because my father wanted to send counsel, and I told him this needed to be said by me. Amara held my gaze. You protected me from becoming what they tried to make you. I swallowed once. She continued. A financial shield. A beautiful signature. Someone useful enough to drain and disposable enough to blame. The words hit closer than I expected. I had spent years describing my own life in technical terms because technical language made it survivable. Liability, exposure, risk, recovery, collateral. Amara had just said it plainly. She had almost become me, and I had stopped it. You do not owe me gratitude, I said. Yes, she said. I do. No, you owe yourself a clean escape. That is different. She looked down at her bare hand. The annulment is moving quickly. I heard. I keep expecting to feel embarrassed. That may come. Maybe. She flexed her fingers once, as if feeling the absence of the ring. Right now, I feel angry that I miss someone who never existed. That was the most honest thing anyone had said in days. You miss the person he performed, I said. That grief is real, even if he was not. Her eyes glistened then, only then. She looked away quickly, gathering herself with the discipline of someone who had been raised never to collapse in public. I did not offer a tissue. It felt too small. Instead, I let the silence protect her. After a while, she said, You were the only person in that room who told the truth before it was safe. I thought about that. Had I? I had waited, calculated, documented, moved through channels. I had been strategic, not brave, but maybe bravery and strategy were not opposites. Maybe, for people trained to survive, bravery had to become methodical. My family would disagree, I said. Your family mistook obedience for morality. I looked at her. No one had ever described it that cleanly. Amara rose. I stood too. My father hopes you will review the proposal by next week, she said. No pressure to accept. Of course there is pressure, I said. She almost smiled. Fair. But it is business pressure, not family pressure. That is much cleaner. At the door, she paused. One more thing, she said. Thanksgiving is in Atlanta this year. My mother hosts too much food for too many people. You should come. The invitation caught me completely unprepared. Business, I understood. Debt, I understood. Legal exposure, collateral priority, recovery strategy, compliance review, all of that made sense. Thanksgiving did not. I do not want to intrude. You would not be. Amara, my father likes you. My mother respects you. I think I owe you at least one holiday where no one gets arrested. I laughed. It surprised both of us. The sound was small but real. I'll think about it, I said. She nodded, accepting that as more than it sounded like. After she left, I remained standing for several minutes, looking at the proposal on my desk. The Hale family had spent 34 years teaching me that belonging had to be earned through usefulness. That love arrived only when I paid, fixed, signed, absorbed, or stayed quiet. Then Amara Whitcomb walked into my office with no ring on her hand, no demand in her voice, and an offer that did not require me to betray myself. My parents tried to make me look worthless in front of the Whitcombs. Instead, the Whitcombs became the first powerful family that ever looked at me and saw value. But before I could build anything new, I had to empty the house that built me. The Newport estate looked smaller when it was being emptied. That surprised me. For years, that house had lived in my memory like a monument, pale stone on the cliff, tall windows glowing with parties I was expected to help prepare but never fully belonged to. Marble floors, imported rugs, portraits of ancestors whose names my father used like legal documents whenever he wanted obedience. But when the movers came, the mansion lost its authority piece by piece. The chandeliers came down first. Watching them lowered from the ceiling felt obscene in a quiet way, like seeing a crown removed from a corpse. Then came the paintings, the antique mirrors, the silver, the wine inventory, the vehicles, the staged furniture my mother had once called timeless. Nothing looked timeless with an asset tag on it. Graham Ellis, the auditor assigned to the recovery process, walked through each room with a tablet and the patient disappointment of a man who had seen rich people try every foolish thing possible. Missing watches, he said in my father's study. I looked up from the inventory sheet. How many? 4 listed, none present. Jewelry? Several pieces missing from the safe inventory as well. Of course. Even at the end, Conrad Hale still believed rules were obstacles for lesser people. We found him 20 minutes later near the rear service entrance, holding a leather duffel bag. He froze when he saw me. For one ridiculous second, I thought he might pretend he was going to the gym. Graham stepped forward. Mr. Hale, open the bag. My father looked at me instead. You would really do this? There was no shame in his voice, only accusation. I remembered him standing in my office, asking for $200,000 while threatening to drag me into his collapse. I remembered him at the wedding, telling me to leave through the service entrance. Now here he was, using that same entrance to hide watches from creditors. Yes, I said. I would really report concealed assets during a lawful inventory. His face hardened. You enjoy this. I looked around the hollow study, at the bare rectangle on the wall where his favorite portrait had hung. No, I said. I outgrew needing to. Graham documented the bag, the watches, the jewelry. My father's expression when he realized that even his small thefts had witnesses now. My mother was upstairs in what had once been her dressing room, sitting on a velvet bench while two women cataloged designer gowns. She did not speak to me. She did not have to. Her silence was not peace. It was hatred with better posture. I left her there. The last room I entered was mine, or what had been mine. It was smaller than I remembered. Pale wallpaper, narrow windows, a built-in bookshelf that still carried faint scratches from where I used to hide notebooks behind old textbooks. Most of my childhood things were gone. My mother had cleared them years ago. Probably without noticing, she was erasing evidence that a daughter had ever lived there. In the bottom drawer of the desk, beneath a stack of yellowed stationery, I found a faded notebook, my diary. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened it. The handwriting belonged to a girl who pressed too hard with her pen. I read one entry from when I was 14. Please let Mom be proud of me tomorrow. Please let Dad notice I got an A. Please let Preston not be mad if I don't lend him my birthday money. Please let them love me if I'm good enough. I closed the notebook. There are wounds you can mourn forever if you keep feeding them proof. I carried the diary downstairs to the living room fireplace. The movers had removed the screen, but the hearth remained. I lit the pages one at a time. Not because that girl was embarrassing, not because she was weak, because she had begged long enough. The paper curled black and disappeared. I watched until every page was ash. Several months later, Preston was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. The prosecutors laid out the pattern clearly. Inflated valuations, misrepresented collateral, fraudulent financial documents, attempted misuse of escrowed funds, a structure of lies held together by family reputation and borrowed credibility. Preston blamed everyone, me, my parents, the banks, the market, a former accountant, a lender who misunderstood the vision, even Amara briefly, until his attorney convinced him that attacking the victim was not improving his sentencing posture. Conrad received probation, community service, and financial penalties after cooperation agreements and negotiated findings tied to the concealment attempts and corporate misrepresentations. He aged 10 years in one afternoon. Marjorie received home confinement and lost the only prison she had ever truly feared: society. No invitations, no charity boards, no whispered admiration, no sympathetic lunches at private clubs where women pretended fraud was tragedy if the flowers had been expensive enough. After sentencing, Julian, my driver, asked if I wanted to go straight to the airport. No, I said. Drive past their building. He glanced at me in the mirror, but did not ask why. The apartment complex was clean, cheap, and ordinary. Beige brick, small balconies, a parking lot with faded lines. Marjorie walked out carrying 2 paper grocery bags. No driver, no pearls, no audience. Just generic cereal visible over the top of one bag and rain flattening her hair. Conrad stood near the entrance wearing a reflective community service vest, speaking to a supervisor who did not seem impressed by him. When I was 16, my mother told me I ruined the family aesthetic by wearing thrift store shoes to a luncheon after Preston had spent the clothing budget on a watch. I watched them for 10 seconds. Then I said, I just wanted to see if the aesthetic suited them. Julian did not smile, but his eyes did. Back in Manhattan, the final transfer documents waited on my desk. The Hale assets were absorbed into my firm's portfolio. Commercial properties, recovery rights, residual claims, liquidated collateral, what my parents had called legacy, became a line item, reviewed, valued, and filed. I signed the final page without shaking. That evening, my phone buzzed. Amara, Thanksgiving is still open. My mother says to tell you she makes terrible cranberry sauce but excellent pie. I read the message twice. Then I typed back, I'll come. A minute later, she answered, Good. No one is allowed to discuss escrow at dinner. I laughed alone in my office. Later, I stood on my balcony with a glass of bourbon I barely drank, watching Manhattan flicker awake beneath me. The city looked like 1,000 windows refusing to apologize for being lit. For years, I had mistaken survival for peace. They are not the same. Survival is leaving the room before they can make you pay for the damage. Peace is realizing you are no longer waiting outside the door, hoping someone will invite you back in. I did not forgive my family. Forgiveness is too often demanded from people who were never given safety. But I released them. I released the fantasy that my mother would become gentle if I suffered correctly. I released the hope that my father would respect me if I earned enough. I released the old duty to rescue Preston from fires he started while calling me jealous for smelling smoke. Family is not a license to use someone as collateral. Blood does not make abuse sacred. And if the people who raised you hand you a document cutting you loose, read it carefully. Sometimes the thing they think will destroy you is the first honest gift they ever gave you. So if you have ever been the scapegoat, the emergency wallet, the one they blamed until they needed you, tell me this. When did you finally stop paying for people who never protected you?